All right. Well, thank you for joining me today. I have been doing this workshop quite a bit and changing and moving things around a little bit. So I've done a tiny bit of moving just before our meeting today. So let's see how this works. I'm going to dive us right into the work. So let's get started. I'm finding some shade, some spot. There we go. Okay, so let me share my screen here. I have quite a few visuals to share with you today, and also some movement activities. They're all very low buy-in, very low ask. Feel free to go ahead and try them along with us. So let me just start right here. Okay, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger here. Okay, dish dances. Dish dances is, for me, now that I think about it, it is an excuse for me to bring students from the Center for Indigenous Theatre to work on the Credit River. It is a real reason for me to bring people. I teach at the Center for Indigenous Theatre. I teach story creation there. So I've been working with a young group of artists there for a year now. And so this was a really nice opportunity for us to meet in person and to have some time together. Sorry for this kind of shifting. I'm going to have to actually just navigate this strip of light. Okay, well, let's go into this. So the Credit River is is in Brampton. This one portion we were working at a place called Camp Nivelt that allowed us some play space essentially to film an experimental dance video there. This is my cast. They are a mix of students, as I mentioned, from the Center for Indigenous Theatre, along with some crew members and some returning performers who'd been involved with the Talking Treaties project for quite a few years. So I wanted to make a project. Talking Treaties in general has lived since 2015. I wanted to think about making something that would last a really long time. So the work has now been alive for around 7 years, and we're now in our legacy phase with the project. But I just wanted to point to some of these participants who've been around since the very beginning, since our interview phase, since our quick creation phase, who've really helped us generate the visuals we need to tell this story deeply. So I want to start here with this visual of the dish with one spoon belt. All right, I'm going to give you an opportunity right now in our chat to go ahead and describe this belt. So just look at the features of it physically, all right? So what are we looking at when you wanted to describe the pattern, describe the textures you're seeing, the symbols that might be there, and drop them into our chat. So we're going to flood our chat with descriptions of what this belt looks like. Purely visual. Go ahead. Drop those into our chat, our group chat. And they're starting to show up. We got a circular shape in the middle. It's shiny. There are rows of beads. I'll say tassels. All right, maybe that's how you spell tassels. There's tassels, okay? There's string. There are 7 rows. It's mostly white. There's a circular shape in the middle. There are affinities. Perfect. We'll go on a little bit further here into this story. And I just want to tell you that this idea around the dish with one spoon is very complicated. We sometimes minimize this agreement to say it's a sharing agreement. It's a very environmental centric agreement, but it's actually much more than that, and it's a lot deeper. So we like to think about, I like to think about this role actually when it comes to the historical narratives that can connect this story directly to Toronto area. So I am a big image creator. I like working outdoors. I like working with puppetry and working with big objects and movement. So really this is an opportunity for me to take some of those big visuals that showed up when I was thinking about this work, reading through the historical narratives. So I just had this first visual of this giant hand kind of chasing after us, because there is so much tension and pressure that actually initiated these agreements between ourselves. So we have times of trouble, and then we have really beautiful processes for peace that are really foundational for these regions. So I'm going to start to talk through some of those times of trouble, but then also talk through some of those important symbols we need to understand around returning back, coming back together, returning to council, returning to locations, really key locations in and around our city, and the role, as I'd like to say here, of the warning device, the role of the alarm, the role of actually the eagle, and in this case, this warning hand. All right. So starting from our hand, I was thinking through some of the ways to talk about the really beautiful aspects of the interviews that we gathered way back in 2015, talking to various people from our community. And they were saying really wonderful things about our town, about this place. And they would say things that I didn't know how to deal with, like the water always has a memory, remove your shoes, this is sacred land. Words like sacred, I wasn't sure how to deal with. So I brought them to song creators. I brought them to movement people. And we started to think of different ways to get into this content. So I'm just going to introduce to you a kind of example of an experimental movement process and how that kind of plays out and into this dish dance work. So this visual here is a bit of a close-up visual of a quilt. A lot of our props for the dish dances are slightly quilted, and they're filled with these embroidery objects, these small pieces. These embroidery pieces were generated way back in 2019 as part of the Toronto Biennial of Art, the inaugural one. So these are just an example of what a workshop looks like. It's nice and relaxed, and inviting other people in and bringing some of my facilitators, some of the performers you'll see in the videos, to actually help me facilitate these workshops too. So performers have so much capacity for memory and also the ability to help facilitate, help draw things out, help talk to people. I love really bringing them into the work at all phases and stages of the development of Talking Treaties projects. Wearing them on our back, embroidering these things onto our backs, these questions. The question I brought to us to deal with was kind of connected to looking at this narrative of the Toronto Purchase, but then bringing it to a really personal way when we're making choices for Toronto to be in this area, when we're making choices, when we think of those things we want to care for, those things we want to have around for the future. What are those things that we take into consideration? What are those things that we need to be considering when making choices in Toronto? There are a lot of things that come to mind. So I want to give us this fun opportunity to actually do what these performers are doing in one aspect of our dish dances video, which is taking those embroidery visuals and bringing them to life a little bit. Okay, so this is our very first experiment. I want you to choose a visual that stands out to you from this package of in development embroidery objects, okay? Take a little scoop out of the air. Grab a little scoop out of the air, and I want you to actually start sculpting this little scoop into one of these shapes. So take one of these ones you're drawn to, a visual you're drawn to here, and you're just going to start to actually build it. So I'm building those little towers, okay? They're strong. There we go. I'm choosing to build the structure of the towers. And just take some time to really, really investigate that all the way around. Ooh, it's so nice. It's really important. We have to care for this. This is somebody's thoughts of what they wake up and consider in the morning. So close that up. You can put it away, put it in your pocket for now. Okay, we'll bring those back. So I'm going to bring us a little bit further, but just to say that kind of work seems really small and personal, but when we work with dancers, when we work with choreographers, that actually is a choreographic material. If we wanted to extend those buildings much further, then we could actually start developing movement phrases and gestures based off of that work. So that was one aspect of the work that went into dish dances. This has been an interest of mine for quite a while. So we've been doing this work with choreographers, working with movers to get a little bit deeper into the understandings. What are the symbols that we need to be familiar with in Toronto to understand these agreements that we mentioned so often? So I'm going to bring us back to Credit River, to a time period where the Mississaugas were still having meetings at their villages. They had the Credit River Mission. This place would have been a Methodist community where the Mississaugas would have lived. This area is currently the golf. It's a golf course actually right now, Mississauga Golf and Country Club. But the thing is, this would have been a location of quite a while ago where we would have actually had councils between Haudenosaunee people, between Anishinaabe people, between other nations that would have been in relationship with the Mississauga Nation. So they were around this area, probably moving a couple times around that Credit River. But I just want to say the Credit River and that location is still desired. You know, just that opportunity to bring our students back to that area was so interesting to me, especially because they're students from a different part of the country. They're Indigenous students from mostly around the Edmonton region. So bringing in this area and talking about some of the foundational understandings that we need to have, right? Coming to council, returning to conversation, hashing out our problems, thinking about keeping the peace between our nations. It's been going on since at least 1701. Absolutely. We've been in and have been maintaining peace between our nations. So I wanted to draw a literal line, okay, right into the Toronto area. Take a little scan down there at the Mississauga Golf and Country Club. I'd love for you to make a doodle just for yourself, okay? Just for yourself on a page. Draw a diamond, and inside that diamond, I would love for you to draw a little eagle. That's it. So a diamond with an eagle in it. Isn't that nice? Okay, that's the representation that you will see actually at the Mississauga Golf and Country Club region, right there on the Credit River. There was a council fire that was on the Credit River, and they say they put an eagle there. So that eagle represents the, we'll say the primary clan, one of the more populous clans of the Mississaugas. There are other clans that they have, but a lot of them happen to be Eagle Clan. So this connects up a narrative that brings us all the way out to the Sault Ste. Marie area. So if you've ever driven out there, you'll understand that it's a quite a long drive, okay, to get to Sault Ste. Marie from Toronto. That is the distance of one of the agreements that help us uphold the dish with one spoon in this region, okay? I want to point to that part just north of Toronto, and it's in Lake Simcoe. It says the Fish Weirs site, the historical Fish Weirs site. And I'll tell you a little bit about that connection to the dish with one spoon also. So there was a dish placed at that place, at the narrows of Lake Simcoe. There was a dish placed there because we knew that area was so bountiful. We knew there was so much to hunt in that region. We knew that there were so much fish possibilities there because of the fishing weirs, those trees hammered in the water that had the nets or fences between them, where we get the name Toronto, the Duggerontos, all right, Duggerontos. So let's go on a little bit. Here we have Lake de Toronto right up there. If you don't notice, that Toronto is not in Toronto, that is north of the city. That's written inside that small Lake Simcoe, because that would be where a council site would be, north of the city. There would also be a really, as I mentioned before, contentious area, a place where we knew that there was so much bounty. In addition, there's also a dish placed right there where we say on the credit river. We're talking about a time period around 1701. There was a reading of this belt. This is a replica. So when I had you draw that diamond with the eagle in it, you were actually drawing a version of the end of this belt that shows the council site that would have been on the credit with the eagle watching over it. Okay. This is a replica belt. We don't know what this agreement would have actually looked like. We don't know what this belt really would have looked like. So this is a reproduction belt. I'll tell you a little bit about the role of the eagle on the credit now. So there's multiple meanings for this eagle, but in general, we say that that eagle's job placed upon a tall pine tree watches over the council fires, right? And makes sure that if any ill winds blew upon them, that they would call people to come to a council. So anytime we see our alliances challenged, anytime we see the relationships between our nations not coming together to council, it's sometimes a little bit of a duty, an Indigenous to Indigenous duty, to call ourselves back to meeting together and to hashing out our hopes, right? To hashing out how we're going to be in these ideas together. So let's go a little bit further. After the this conversation that I mentioned, there's a note about this embodied gesture. And this embodied gesture says something to the tune of, they took each other by the arms and they called each other brother. And I just really, we don't know what this visual looks like either, like what it actually looks like. So I just want you to take a moment with your arms actually and possibly feel out what this can be. Grab one of your arms. This feels nice and strong, right? Just one, okay? Let's shake that back out. Now this time I want you to take your arms and bring them together and connect your arms, hand to forearm. And you're gonna let one arm lead, okay? So move around, use this as an excuse to get into your back, but let one arm be the leader, all right? Let one arm be the main leader. And in a moment, you're gonna switch. So let the other arm be the main leader. What's it doing? Are your hands having to hold on tightly? What's going on with you? Let's let that kind of come apart. So start to let your arms sort of slip apart, let your elbows pull apart. Oh, you're holding on by your fingers now. It's pretty tough. And let's release it. Oh, challenging. Okay, shake that out. Let's come back in here, nice and gentle. Let's come back to this position, but this time I want you to move from the space between your wrists, okay? So initiate this movement from the space between your wrists. So this time your arms are moving together, right? Just see the difference in what your grasp is like when you're all on the same page here. It's not as challenging. Maybe you're not as holding on just as tight because you both know what you're up to, okay? So relax, let that go, shake that off. Thank you for doing that. We're gonna move on to another visual. Back to the eagle, the world of the eagle. So they say this agreement, the dish with one spoon, was really extended around the time the French came to this country. So we know that that would have been 16 later, or late 16-ish, but we know by 1701, there was absolutely an extension of this, this agreement at this great peace of Montreal. Point to number 13, image here, and that is a representation of an eagle, and it says Mark de Mississaugas. So the Mississaugas went all the way to Montreal to be part of this agreement. They camped out on the shores of my community of Kahnawake and would travel over to Montreal to be part of this giant bid for peace that was actually initiated by the French. So just before this time, the French had also actually caused us quite a bit of trouble between our nations. They'd allowed, there was a time period where we were kind of starting to battle it out a little bit over some of the commercial interests, some of the fur trade. We had just followed a few years of things called the Beaver Wars. We had Morning Wars. We had times of fighting between ourselves. And at this point, definitely by this point, we agreed that no more fighting between ourselves. We all have the right to life. We all have the right to sustain our lives. We all have the right to kind of share a little bit. So sharing is always complicated. You know, it's hard to share. It's hard to tell people what to do also in a specific territory. But what this agreement ended up doing, this Great Peace of Montreal, actually this general, the guy, this French governor, passed around a big dish of meat actually to all these nations. He used a visual of sharing and eating together to help unite actually, and it allowed essentially some movement of the French. It allowed them to go a little bit deeper into the Great Lakes region because nobody would be fighting anymore in that region. Okay, so I wanted to point to this eagle. The Mississaugas still use the visual of the eagle quite a bit. This is on their logo, their own town's logo. They've moved the new off of their name, so now they're Mississaugas of the Credit. But here they are watching over a confederacy, Three Fires. They're Three Fires Confederacy, and they have a peace pipe that's also got a tomahawk bottom. There's always the capacity for peace, and there's always the capacity for a little bit of trouble. So I'm going to think about some of those ideas. I'm going to bring us right into a movement sequence, and it's 12 minutes. It's 3 videos that are back to back, and I would love for you to feel free to join along with us. Feel free to have your camera on if you like, and I'm going to play them back to back. This is a collaborative creation. It is working with some concepts of introducing, you'll get a little bit of the description of it, but some of the hard challenges about welcoming people to a territory that might not be your own, sharing with people in a territory that clearly belongs to a nation. When we talk about nations and we talk about the nation that a territory that a nation might live in, there was clearly distinct areas. That's why we have that eagle there. This is eagle territory along that area. There is a community that lives around there. So if we're going to come to that area, what do we need to do? How do we need to approach that area? How do we need to prepare ourselves and prepare others to be together, to come to conversations in a really good way? All right, to come to council, to meet with each other. So let's go ahead and watch these videos together. This is a co-creation with myself, some students from Center for Indigenous Theatre with 2 choreographers, Aria Evans and Animikikwe Kuchi. And so let's just share this. I'll stop this portion of it and move us into the video aspect. So feel free to use a lot of space around yourself. Let me get my share screen here. Here we go. I'm going to be going full out in my room. Feel free to do it like me, but you could also do it with your camera off and just feel it out yourself. All right. So let's get rolling. Okay. I'll walk us through. There are 8 moves total. And I promise you, you'll be able to catch them all right? I'll walk us through and talk us through this whole thing together.
The moves that we were working with when we were on the cliff mimicked the idea of inviting somebody who wasn't from the place that you are onto your land, into your territory, and trying to show ways through gesture to teach them about the protocols that they should engage with to come in a good way.
Our first move is called Hold the Dish.
We were playing with imagery of making a bowl to sizzle the dish with 1 spoon. I was working with gathering something in front of me and bringing it into my center, collecting what I need and I want for myself in that moment. Like bringing everything in, and like I just thought of it as like kind of just welcoming it.
Number 2, something precious.
It was like holding something really like precious to me.
I was thinking about kind of sifting something that's like kind of settling down to the bottom surface. For me, that can be so many things. It can be a human, it can be an object, it can be an energy, it can be an animal, but there's something that feels really natural and fundamental about just like holding something in your arms that you want to take care of.
Offer some away. Move 3.
Caring for things, giving back.
To offer some of what was in that bowl away so that you're sharing your resources with someone else. Sending out voice, sending out spirit, sending out intentions.
Let's bring those first 3 together so you can see how this works. Hold the dish, something precious, and let's offer some away. Wonderful. So we got 2 more moves. There are 8 total. Next one is called portals.
Holding and shining lights inside of my body, like a glowing orb, a soft light, and with this kind of floating, scanning over different body parts. Well, it feels like a doorway or opening, and kind of like a eternal portal that's showing all the layers behind it.
Keep it clean.
One of the agreements of the dish is to keep it clean. So the idea of that starting from within, starting from the self. So we all smudged or cleansed ourselves, however that practice resonated with us.
We were doing kind of overall smudging, like kind of bringing or like calling back like the ancestors. So I was getting really like low and then bringing it up with a light feeling. Because we were beside the river, it also felt like cleansing to bring the water, imagining the water coming up over our face and having that refreshing kind of feeling from the water.
Sometimes this is coming up and over the front of the body and down the back of the body like a waterfall or a soft stream of water.
In Anishinaabe culture, back home, we do a lot of smudging, and it's good for yourself and others to have those good intentions with others. In my own like personal way, like even that one move, I can imagine it like I was cleansing myself, like smudging. That really resonated with me, like because I did it multiple ways, like I would traditionally, like when I smudge in the morning. So it's kind of like a rerun of that, Well, the smudging was really powerful to me because that's something that we all share, no matter what tribe you're from. We all smudge.
Okay. Offer some back.
The movement where we went back, something about that was really beautiful to me.
We wanted to acknowledge all of the ancestors that have come before us, all of our spirits that guide us, remembering the generations that came before me as they kind of float by like clouds.
And listening to voices from the past that could give us directions or anything for the future.
To the future.
Offering something on to others. It's the reverse smudge.
That you're bringing some of that forward into the future and thinking about the next generation. There, the idea was acknowledging yourself and where you come from, your history, in relationship to where you are.
This is the easiest thing to do in the world.
Great. We have quite a few moves. We have one more to learn, and we'll bring them all together.
Calling everyone to come over from the other side, welcoming everyone. Like, to me, it was just like very, personal and like nice,
welcoming from across to be with you, or just to see what's going on.
After I let them in and open up, then I ask them to come in and to welcome them.
That's your last move, and we'll bring it all together. I'll walk us through. I'll speak it aloud, so just follow along. Okay, hold the dish. Something precious. Offer some away. In a little while, you'll move into portals. And then to keep it clean. To the past. Offer to the future. And let's welcome us all back. Great. Perfect. We're all coming back. I'll stop share here, and I'm going to pause my presentation. Thank you. I'll join us back. So there are quite a few more visuals I'm going to walk us through now to complement these ideas. Thank you for going ahead with that. I hope that gave you a little shake up and an excuse to move around at your desk. Okay. I just truly love talking about these things and the commonalities across our cultures, across our nations, especially across when we talk about across Canada, So there are alliances and relationships that we need to think about, but also commonalities. There are so many kind of foundational things for these regions that we need to be aware of. So we know it's hard to tell people what to do. What do we need to do to make sure that this is such common knowledge when you enter a space, right? How do we know, how do we teach people that everyone has the right to be here and to also sustain their lives if they follow a couple of those rules? Keep it clean, make sure there's stuff for the future, you know, keep those channels of communication open through us. So even if you don't know where you are, right, we can still ground ourselves with having some of those understandings, like this one. So just returning to another layer of seeing that bird, that eagle actually on top of a tree. So this is very common symbols for this region. If you came to this region, you would know about these images. This is the Confederacy, our Haudenosaunee Confederacy now, this time with an eagle on top. Same job, to make sure that alliance is happening, to call the people to council if we're not meeting together, to have these group discussions, okay? The origin, one of the possible origins of the dish with one spoon, they say started with this understanding. So 50 chiefs around this circle, all holding on to each other, making sure that tree doesn't fall over, but also 50 chiefs in a circle, making sure that each one of them are able to take some food from a dish, okay? A dish is passed around amongst these people, and there's a beaver tail stew inside this dish, and everyone takes what they need, and they have to make sure that that dish makes it all the way around so every one of those 50 chiefs can have some, and there's still some more left in that dish. So what do you have to do? You got to keep that dish clean. You got to make sure you take only what you need, and you have to make sure that there's some stuff there for the future. So sometimes it's a little simplified into those three kind of foundational understandings, but they're very common. They're understandings that a lot of our nations share internationally. So it is inevitable that people will take too much. My own nation, my own community, way back in the time of Yellowhead, when talking about that great Eternal Council Fires belt in the 1860s, a conversation occurs, and they say, hey, those people at Ganawage, they already broke the dish. Yeah, we probably did. Maybe we were too greedy. Maybe we did cut off trade between nations. Maybe we had some troubles. It's true. So there's a lot of challenges to this idea of this shared territory, unless you follow those rules. I'm going to drop us in two more visuals that connect up to this kind of the other networks of alliances that help us to know who's in our territory, to help us introduce ourselves. When we often introduce ourselves, you'll hear me say, Waiahawi Yujats, Kahnawage, Ginagere, Okwari, Niwa Kitaroda, which could mean, it translates, I had to take Mohawk lessons to learn this. It means the clay that I'm made of is bare. So I'll introduce in that way. You know where I'm from, you know my community's history, you know my name, you know my clan, and all those alliances, right? This is related to actually Oneida Sign Language. So a whole other layer of embodied intelligences that would have complemented our spoken language, so that we're able to communicate across nations, across really long distances. There's a Plains version of this sign language that Indigenous people over there use also. So I just wanted to say, I asked that question. Who else is bear here? Because there are always bears. Okay, there's always bear person in a group of Native people. And there we go, got two people from Edmonton region who are also bear. So I could ask them, you bear? Yeah, these guys are bear. So I all have a responsibility for them. I have to make sure that they also behave in a good way in this area, you know, that there's enough to go around. If they're in a time of trouble, if they're in a time where they are underhoused or underfed, I'm going to feed them. I'm going to take care of them. I have to treat them like my relatives and my kin. This is another concept So drop one hand on the ground, one hand kind of flat here. Think about where you woke up this morning, okay? Think about where, you slept there last night. This is your region. You wake up here all the time. This is where you travel. Those places you travel for the day, those people you converse with, all that stuff that's happening in your day. Maybe you have to go call your mom in PEI, or you have a long region, you have a long kind of network of responsibilities. This is a visual for nation from Oneida Sign Language. Okay, this is a visual for nation. So it speaks to the fact that we have a ground base, we have a territory that we call home, we have a place that we call our nation, and that means and implies a whole mat of territory. So that kind of messes with that idea of shared territory. It's very clear that there are places that we have been caring for. This visual speaks to the conversation between those two places. So this is one mat, one nation, and this is another nation on the other side. This is the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee friendship belt. And between us, a clear line of communication, a clear line of understanding between our nations. This complements also the Dish with One Spoon belt, this agreement, as well as this agreement. So back to those diamond visuals. This is the bury the hatchet belt between the Haudenosaunee and the Wendat folks, okay? I'm gonna turn my light on. I realize that's what's wrong here. There we go. Thank you for that. I was like, I'm bizarrely lit. Thank you. But bury the hatchet belt underneath, that hatchet is buried, like we showed in that tree underneath. There were some weapons underneath there. So bury the hatchet, that old concept that is connected to that call to council, actually, which is connected to the Dish with One Spoon. We've been dealing with ideas like this through arts and movement for quite a long time with the Talking Treaties project. I just want to show you a couple visuals of moving around beaver pieces. This is a beaver tail as part of a dance piece, actually, about the Dish with One Spoon. I just love this visual. This is our beaver factory. So working and talking about these things with our community members. This is a visual of our beavers in action. This is what shows I do look like. I like the spectacle aspect of the work. I want to talk about this belt a bit. This belt is a visual. It's a photo of the belt, the Dish with One Spoon belt that lived for many years at the Royal Ontario Museum. So it got there in the early years of the Depression era. I don't know if some of you know Pauline Johnson, the poet, the Mohawk poet. Her sister, actually, I don't know what the reason was. It could have been for cultural preservation purposes. It might have been for money. She brought the belt to the Royal Ontario Museum, and it lived there for years and years without people really knowing about it. So years later, by the mid-90s, people started researching these belts and digging through all of the historical documentation and finding references to this Dish with One Spoon. So all of a sudden, there was this kind of push. What is this belt? People, lots of academics researching this agreement. And I'll just let you know that it's still inconclusive. There's still so much we need to learn about these agreements between our nations. So it's hard sometimes to say this is Dish with One Spoon territory, because we need to figure these things out for ourselves first. It is really clear, though, that there was some understanding of these concepts between the other people that came to this region, including the British. So we talk about this agreement, and the representations you see here, they look kind of like little dishes, but they're actually also calls to council. These are forts. These are the British forts that would have been around in this time period. And these are the invitation to come to talk at those forts to the 24 nations that were invited into this Treaty of Niagara we had. So the British are also talking in that way. They understand that we need to have conversations. They understand that we need to continue to keep meeting if we're going to have alliances. And if you just draw the line through, you'll see that beautiful white line that connects their arms and hands together all the way through those forts also. So they're using the iconography of our own iconography to bring these things together. This is another promise that went along with that belt. This was the medal that would have been given to the Mississaugas. And there we have it, a promise being made underneath the watch of an eagle wing on top. So the British using this iconography, these promises, the security of these places, that we will continue to meet up, we will continue to talk, we'll exchange presents. There they are under a tree with a peace pipe. So where are the places in our city that we can continue to think about the dish? Where can our nations meet, Indigenous nation to Indigenous nation, possibly extending even further these concepts to other people? Well, we work at Fort York. Those places were actually meeting places where we would have come to council at the city. They still exist. So just challenge, I like to think about that. That's why we work there. So I bring, this was way back in 2018, the cast from the Talking Treaties Spectacle. I just want to say that a lot of people need to be part of these conversations, even if we don't have all the answers yet. We need to understand that there are some similarities and kind of cultural similarities that allow us to be on the same page, that allow us to understand that, yes, people should be cared for, people should be safe, people should be fed. This area has a lot of room, right? But it also means that we need to only take what we need. We need to make sure that peace is maintained in this region. Bringing people back to the conversation is a really big part of it, as I mentioned before. Some of my other cast members here joining us for workshops over the years with Talking Treaties. How early can we talk about understandings of sharing, but also the complexities of sharing? Pretty early, I think. You know, we understand those from early on. And these youth have had the opportunity to be raised, I guess, alongside Talking Treaties. So they've been involved with this work since 2015. These kids, they're teenagers now, you know, and I just get a kick out of thinking about that. What different cultural context are these people going to have? What responsibilities are they going to feel like they actually do have to carry on their backs? What do they need to consider? How do we take care of all of those wonderful things you have in your pocket, you know, to make sure that they're there for the future, to make sure that even in that small space, we do have a duty and a responsibility to make sure that other people can also take part in those things, that other people can be invited in. Of course, it's challenging. This dish with one spoon concept of sharing is frustrated by these ideas of colonial borders and treaties and chopping up territory and assigning nations areas to live in that the British went ahead and did. So especially with us having been moved so many times to reserves and other places that were within other people's traditional territories, it gets complicated when we say share, okay? It means the responsibility that we mentioned in the Eternal Council Fires belt. It means we need to keep talking. We need to ask and be around each other. We must come and talk with each other to figure out what it means to share. How do we break that down for ourselves and for other people? It's also a challenge because the way that we deal with land claims these days makes it so that people, when they have a land claim in, they have to prove that they're the only people that were ever in that area. And that is incredibly hard, especially in Canada, because we moved so much and because we had so many shared sites like those fishing weirs, right? Places that we would have had to negotiate around. I just wanted to point you in the direction of this idea. So the Mississaugas currently have a water claim in right now since 2015. And I just like to think about what their intentions are for these waters and how we can connect this up to some of the stories that we like to think about the dish with one spoon. Well, I would like to keep personally these waters available for people in the future. You know, I want to make sure that people personally aren't taking what they need, taking too much from these waters. There aren't people that are setting in full nets and taking up all the fish and all the water for their purposes. I want to make sure that they're there for the future, that other people can experience these waterways in a beautiful way, and that we have access to them. So this water claim isn't made specifically with those ideas of the dish with one spoon in mind, but if we're aware of those intentions, we can support their claims. We can kind of do those things that we need, like calling, like being the alarm, like keeping an eye on the systems that are working around our rivers. As much as the dish with one spoon isn't only about the environment exclusively, it's also about the right to life and all of the deep concepts around coming to council. We still need to ask people to meet with Indigenous folks in an earnest way. We need to extend these conversations out. So when you see things like people that don't have enough, what is our role here? What is our role when we see that, you know, it's not being distributed evenly? When we see people that have so much bounty for themselves, well, the role of the eagle is to make sure that those things are called. How can we bring our communities and our governments into conversation around those sharing principles, around those ideas, okay? But also, how can we bring our own nations back to those locations that we need to be on? Okay, those waterfront properties. So if you just so happen to have a beautiful waterfront property in Toronto, feel free to let me know. I got some wonderful performers I could bring there and we could work on the water. So I'm going to stop us there for a moment. And so we have the chance to do the last minute of talking together. Thank you for going ahead with that. I encourage you to get down to a water source somewhere. Have a little fun with those moves if you like. I wanted to flood our chat one more time, this time with visuals. So what's a visual that stuck with you from what we did today? Is there a physical gesture, maybe an icon? Let's just think about that and fill up our chat. So drop those into our chat right now. Visuals that stuck with you. Visuals that stuck with you. I love doing this. Keep it clean. And I've been so intrigued by the energy around my arm, I feel, which has been really entertaining to me. So I'll just say energy along my arm, which is a visual that, okay. So I have, I'm not going to keep us way too late, but I do have a closing video for us. We have 3 minutes before I have to turn our attention to our 2-minute closing video. But would anybody, any questions or anything you would like me to address in the briefest way possible? No, that's okay. Last chance. Did anybody want to pop on for any questions? Otherwise, I'd be more than welcome to bring us into our closing. So I just want to welcome you, though, to return to the conversation as it develops. You know, we aren't aware, as I mentioned, of all of the deep details, and I am completely certain that over the next few years, so much richness will be added to this narrative. So much more research will come out. So many more times we've heard this belt discussed in historical narratives. And once we start to pile them on top of each other, then we'll have a picture of what this could mean. And then we'll have a picture of if we should call this dish with one spoon territory and how comfortable we all are with saying that. So it's still challenging, still inconclusive. And I think there's still a lot more work to be done. So tune back in, keep learning about this agreement on an occasional basis, maybe once a year at this Treaty Recognition Week time, okay, because it will change. The conversation will absolutely change. Let's bring us into our final video then. So the final video is a bit of a reflection from the students at the Center for Indigenous Theatre, some of them, along with one more chance for us to do our moves however you like. Okay, one more chance to do them all together. And this time I won't facilitate it. Just do what you like. Okay, if you really loved that one move, just do it over and over. So thank you for joining me. I'm going to play this and then we will essentially be done. Okay, here we go. Starts with speaking.
Share my body movements with others. I just tried to kind of get a feel for what everyone else was doing, plus what was on my mind. I know we did a lot of work last year with CIT with moving and kind of going with your spirit. So I kind of just let that take over, and it wasn't really like a planned move. It's just whatever I felt at that moment, whatever instinct, I just went with it.
A wavy type motion, animation, putting it together with hip hop, freestyle,
And being aware of my surroundings, recognizing what's there, seeing the land, watching and observing the water as it flows, listening to the sound.
Okay, you can join us for one more round. Make it your own. Have fun with this. And you can welcome us all back. Bring us all back to the space. Thank you. I'm going to stop share here. And I will just let you know that you are welcome to join us in the springtime as part of the Toronto Biennial of Art. We will be at Fort York region, probably in the Garrison Commons, near this really beautiful medicine garden that's planted there, doing some movement workshops. And yeah, keep an eye for that. That'll be available on the Toronto Biennial of Arts website and also on Jumblee's Theatre and Arts website. So keep up for dates on that, probably in April. So thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you everyone who took part in this workshop today. And I'm really glad that I had the chance to do it.